Good morning, PT on ICE Daily Show. I am Dr. Heather Salzer, and I am with the Pelvic Division at ICE. And on this lovely Monday morning, we are going to talk about special considerations for return to CrossFit post C-section. And specifically today, we will be talking about getting back to the GHD sit-up, the bar muscle-up, and the snatch. So in the pelvic division, we have both our level 1 online and our in-person class where we go into depth about postpartum recovery and some of the specifics around scar recovery, scar mobilizations. So for the sake of this podcast, we are going to assume that we have already done all the groundwork. We have done the basics. We have helped that person progress back to some core strength, scar mobility. We've done some of that already, and now we're ready for some more of those advanced movements. Let's start with the GHD sit-up. If you've never done a GHD sit-up, I'm going to try my best to describe it a little bit. So it is on the glute ham developer machine. So you're going to be sitting on this little pad and your feet are going to be sticking out in front of you and your toes will be caught. And then your body will go back in a lumbar extension moment. And at the bottom, in that full lumbar extension, where we are likely either touching the ground or touching a mat, we then use a knee extension moment to help the quads drive. And then we sit up using our abdominals to help all the way into lumbar flexion. So it's like a pretty high demand on our core, right? Now, a lot of the things we're going to mention are very applicable to both C-section and post-vaginal delivery because we're just recovering from core strength. So when I'm getting somebody back to the GHD setup, I love to start on the floor with a medicine ball. So the person will be sitting in front of that medicine ball. And if needed, we can hook their toes under some dumbbells to give them even a little extra assist. And from that medicine ball, they're going to extend fully over it. So we're trying to get some of that same lumbar extension stretch motion. And then they can explosively sit up off of that medicine ball. This is a nice way to start with more of that fast movement. However, they're supported in the end of that range, which can be helpful. Then, before we actually go into trying to get through full range on the GHD, we do want to do a quick screen, make sure okay, in a cobra, in an up dog, do they have mobility through the scar, everything through the whole abdominal tissue to get into that full motion that they'll need for that GHD before we put them on the machine. Then starting off, I like to give people a band. It makes them, or a strap. Don't use a light band. We're talking like our green or thick, green-purple thick bands here. Loop it around the front part of the GHD where your feet sit, and then hold on to that for some extra support as we go through that motion. Ideally, we're starting with maybe more of a quarter motion. Then we go half, and then we can work all the way to full. From here, we may want to ditch the band and then again go back, quarter, half, full. So progressing through that step by step, assessing how we feel afterwards. Once we get back to those full range of motion GHD sit-ups, we are still going to just use a little bit of caution about introducing these into a workout setting. This can be a very taxing movement. And so, yay, I can do GHDs now. I'm going to do 50 in a workout. Again, just as we would with any other injury, any other progression, we want to mix and match and gradually build tolerance for that. So say we're doing sets of 10 in a workout. Maybe for every set of 10, we do 2 or 3 GHD sit-ups, full sit-up, and then maybe we're coming down to ab mat sit-ups on the ground for that 7 or 8, and we assess how did we do the next day. So that would be progression back to the GHD sit-up. Let's talk bar muscle up and snatch. So these two are a little different in that it's not just the demands of the core that we are considering with the C-section. We're more considering the location of the scar and where that bar will now be resting or hitting at that pretty much right where that scar is. So even if we've done some desensitization of the scar, having a bar as you're traveling through the snatch, make hip contact, especially with a heavy weight on it and a high speed, is a lot. Same thing with the bar muscle up, coming up and finishing at the top of that bar. So if you've never done a bar muscle up before, you're swinging on the bar and you're basically ending in this press out position where our arms are down in front of us and we're holding ourselves up on that bar, and that bar is resting again right where often that C-section scar lies. So before getting into either of these movements, a nice way to add on to any scar mobilization, desensitization work that we've already done is actually getting used to the sensation of a bar on that scar without speed and without kind of the pressure of the actual movement happening. I love the barbell hip thrust to do this. And no, we're not starting with just tons of weight on the bar. We may start with a trainer bar with a yoga mat wrapped around it. How does that feel? Can we set up in a place where that bar is over that scar and do some hip thrusts there? Can we add a little bit more weight to the bar? Stick some light weight on there, build in weight. Okay, that's feeling good. Can we now take away that pad, that yoga mat, whatever that looks like, and get used to just the sensation of the bar? Again, a nice way to build tolerance for a metal bar in that area, but without the speed of the movement. If we're going to talk specific with the snatch, there are some things that we can do with the snatch as we get into that movement to potentially make it more tolerable, and then gradually ease into it. So obviously we could decrease load on the bar. Heavier load, we're going to create more impact. We need more force. So starting off lighter is a great option. Additionally, we can start off from a hang position. So thinking either at the knees or in that high hang position, we'll have less momentum and thus less speed as well as we hit that position. And therefore that can feel a little bit more tolerable as well. You can also just purposely slow down that first piece of the motion as you get used to it. If we have an athlete who is really wanting to continue snatching at heavier loads, but that contact is bothering them, we can move to a no contact snatch. So that bar is still going to stay nice and close to the body, but we won't actually make hip contact as we go through that motion. And this is up to you, an athlete, to figure out if this is something that they want to continue to do. The only caution I would have around this is building habits. So eventually, as we get back to this, we would like to make the hip contact because that's going to make the movement more efficient. And so we don't necessarily want to build a habit of never making hip contact. If you have an athlete that has been snatching for years, it's likely that that habit, that movement pattern is pretty drilled into their brain. And so they may be able to easily temporarily step away from making contact, come back to it, not have many issues there. If it's someone who's just learning this movement, you may decide that it's not worth loading heavier to be able to do that no contact snatch because you want them to get more used to that movement pattern. Okay. Lastly, the bar muscle up. So again, for this post C-section, our consideration is a little bit of that kip swing motion, but we're going to say we've already taken care of that. And now we're more concerned about the actual catch position, talking again more about the pressure on the scar. A nice way to start with this, after again, we could have used the barbell hip thrust to help with this, but would be to set up a barbell on the squat rig, right at hip height or right below hip height. And we can practice that catch position, that finish position of the bar muscle up with some foot support. So you can approach that bar on the rig, having your feet still on the ground to help, maybe one foot on the ground, progress to just light toe touch, then progress to even just hovering your feet off for a little bit, dropping back down. a nice way to get used to ending with some pressure on that scar, but without going through that full motion and kind of having it be, again, the speed factor that you add from there. Then get creative. You could cut a pool noodle. We could use one of the coverings for pipe that I do not know what those are called. I'm not a plumber, but the like padded things that you could wrap around a bar that way as well, and cut it so that it goes inside your hands, so that you could have full contact with hands on the pull-up bar, but then have that padding as you go through and finish that bar muscle up. And then from there, doing it that way first, and then eventually we would want to take that away. Also, just as we get back to bar muscle ups, we could think about catching a little bit more in that like dip position, and then thinking about a pretty slow lock out rather than going through that faster, again, to play with that speed factor of the movement. In the meantime, if you're having athletes who want to keep doing that motion as they're working on this progression, you can suggest a ring muscle up instead, as a way to, it's not that same movement, but it's a way to get them doing a similar movement. And we're not concerned, obviously, with the rings about that contact with the barbell. So for all of these movements, the GHD, the snatch, the bar muscle up, I hope you can see that it follows a lot of the same rehab principles that we use with other injuries, with other things that we are getting back to, in that we're just thinking about slow progression, working to that person's tolerance. Where are they at? Building tissue tolerance there, and then moving to that next step. We'll be doing some assess. How did you feel afterwards? How did you feel the next day? Was it pretty sore? Did we push a little too much? Do we need to scale back? Did it feel great? Okay, let's keep going. So using that reassess to figure out where are we at with our dosage and our loading, and is it appropriate? I hope that helps with some of those more kind of advanced movements coming back post C-section. If you're curious what that beginning stage looks like and what our kind of general recovery postpartum looks like, and how we can help athletes in this period and all individuals, jump into one of our pelvic courses. We have level 1 and level 2 online starting January 20th of 2025. So start off the year with a good ring. Or we have one more opportunity to join us live in Texas, December 7th and 8th. Have a great Monday, everyone. Thanks for being here this morning, and I'll see you next time.